When Ubisoft announced Star Wars Outlaws, I honestly had no reaction. They are promising the world with this game, but they're also Ubisoft. Like most mega publishers of the 2010s, they tanked their reputation with gamers, myself included, and I think the last game I really tried sinking my teeth into from them was Assassin's Creed Unity back in 2013, and while they seemed to bounce back a bit over time, even with somewhat intriguing gameplay, I wasn't really sure I was going to play Star Wars Outlaws. The character looked like another skinny brunette woman, like many other Star Wars protagonists, and I saw her droid assassin friend and honestly assumed he would be a meme character like K2SO or something. Honestly, I just had no interest in this. That was until the day the game came out and my boss randomly gave me $100. At that point, I figured what the hell and decided to pick up the game, and despite hearing some harsh things about the game online, I had a good enough time with the thing. Star Wars Outlaws was, as I stated, published by Ubisoft, but was produced by Massive Entertainment, a studio that worked hand in hand with Ubisoft for a while, working on some big IPs like Assassin's Creed and Far Cry before making the move into their own series, Tom Clancy's The Division, and eventually Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, which dropped a year before this game, and then of course this game. Anyhow, with EA no longer having exclusive rights to Star Wars games, Massive Entertainment expressed interest in making a Star Wars game starring a scoundrel in an open world back in 2018. That would eventually come to pass when this game was greenlit. The game used sources across the Star Wars media line to build up the game and decided to set it dead in the heart of the original trilogy, between the original film and The Empire Strikes Back. Thus Kay, the lead, would be trapped between the Empire, rebels, gangsters, and assassins. Kay was modeled off of characters like Han Solo, Indiana Jones, James Bond, Lara Croft, Lando Calrissian, that vibe. Being more of a resourceful underdog than a resource-rich military person or a well-trained Jedi or something that we would often see in these Star Wars games. Tracking the character from being nothing to a respected member of the crime community, I guess. Basically, you take Kay from a nobody to a legend. That's the idea of the game. The game was developed with the Snowdrop engine, which is a proprietary Ubisoft engine used for games like The Division, Mario Rabbids, and Rocksmith. I guess. Anyhow, the game released on August 30th, 2024 on PS5, PC, and Xbox, with an upcoming Switch 2 port dropping in September. The story takes place in 3 ABY and follows Kay Vess, who's trying to escape Canto Bight during a power grab of Solandro Barsha of Zarek Besh. After teaming up with some rebels to infiltrate Barsha's tower, Kay is betrayed and caught by the boss, eventually escaping and stealing a ship, the Trailblazer, a one-of-a-kind freighter that she takes to the planet Toshira, where her new ship broke down, gaining help from a Rhodian Waka, who eventually betrays her, but leads her to getting help from Jalen Vrax and his assassin droid ND5. From here, you can walk through the next 2 planets any way you want. To recruit a team on Tatooine, you infiltrate Jabba's palace to save a Heavy, Haas, who betrays them and dies, only for her to find a different ally, Vale, to be her Heavy instead. On Akiva, she meets another Rhodian. This one, Gideek, is a droidsmith who can hack droids and shit, though while you work these tasks, Jalen Vrax hires Kay's mother, Rico, who brought her into the slicing and crime game at a young age, but abandoned her as a child. Kay and Rico start connecting again, but you know how stories like this go. Anyhow, the gang break back into Solandro's vault, but are double-crossed by Rico and Vrax. Anyhow, Vrax has ND5 turn on Kay due to his inhibitor chip and runs off to meet with Darth Vader. Turns out Vrax is Solaro's brother, and Vrax kills him to take over the crime family. Kay fights ND5 and takes off his inhibitor chip. The duo then kill Vrax and escape, but Rico was captured and brought to an Imperial prison. Since she helped Kay a bit, following the double cross, Kay helps break her mom out. The game also has side stories and side quests featuring characters like Kira from Solo leading Crimson Dawn, Jabba the Hutt from the Hutt Syndicate, and many, many more side quests that you can get from random NPCs along the way. Kay Vess is our lead. She's a wannabe in a planet that has a pretty steep wealth gap. with no real family but a caretaker, Bram Shano, who is a bartender that lets her stay in his bar and acts as a best friend and father figure to Kay, following her mother leaving her as a child. Rico Vess, her mom, is hard for Kay to deal with after walking out on her as a kid. She pops back up during her hero's journey and becomes an ally, obviously selling her out to Jalen at one point in the story. Eventually, Kay does help get her mom free from Imperial prison at the end, but Kay kinda doesn't know how to feel about her mom's sudden return originally. Rico herself, seemingly wanting a relationship with Kay, but at the same time, being totally willing to fuck over her daughter in the pursuit of her goals, as she is everybody in this tough galaxy. Speaking of betrayal, Kay's first taste of the galaxy beyond was with Erodian Waka, who eventually dies after betraying Kay to Vale Tormin, who of course eventually joins the party. Ank Parko is Kay's safecracker and munitions expert that joins the squad. We don't get a ton from her, but she's a Chidara fan, and honestly I love these guys so much, cute little creepy dudes. Gadik is a Rhodian that isn't an asshole, and is actually a genius inventor and hacker, working on old, obsolete tech that often comes from the Clone Wars until he was forced into Imperial service, then liberated by Kay. Vale Tormin isn't part of the Trailblazer crew, but is still essential to the effort, eventually helping Kay and vying for a higher role in the bounty hunter syndicates. Her and Kay bond a bit after the initial very violent beginning to their acquaintance, after the betrayal by Waka. Haas was meant to be the heavy, but the gambling addict sold out Kay and gave her buddy Nyx to the Hutts, which leads to a pretty fun mission where you have to infiltrate Jabba's palace and save your little friend Nyx. Though after Haas dies, Vale ends up taking his place as the heavy on their mission. ND5 is a slave droid to Jalen before being liberated by Kay at the end of the game. At first he's very serious and all about service to his master, but as the game goes on and Kay gives him some compassion, he eventually comes around being a little more autonomous as far as droids can be, which is a pretty common theme I think in like Star Wars books and stuff, but you don't see it in visual mediums as much, so I kind of liked this angle they took. Jalen Vrax is Kay's benefactor that he sets up to do his dirty work against his brother, unbeknownst to Kay, with Jalen not only wanting Cyro's gang, but also wanting his brother dead for trampling his family on the way to the top. Solaro wants the Zarik Besh gang under his thumb, and is a mob boss man. Nothing too special about him. Basically, Jalen is the puppet master, hoping to kill his brother, take his syndicate, and do it all without lifting a finger, with Kay and her crew being his unknowing puppets. I like them as villains enough, and while Darth Vader's cameo seems a bit pointless, I also think it adds tension and sort of an unknown X-factor to the story. It's sort of fun having someone so below Vader's story kind of see Vader and just be absolutely confused. That was a fun moment, though in terms of Kay's story, I think Darth Vader is more or less pointless. Star Wars Outlaws is a third-person action game like the Star Wars Jedi series over at EA. This game, however, features Kay Vess, an outlaw and scoundrel, rather than Cal Kestis, a Jedi Knight, and as a result there are similarities in gameplay, but it works a bit differently. Much like Cal, climbing and parkour is a major tool in Kay's arsenal, climbing into Imperial bases, sneaking into gang-occupied forts, and exploring biomes of the Star Wars universe pretty cleanly, though sometimes, I will admit, climbable surfaces can kind of blend in here and there, which is pretty frustrating. Kay even has an equivalent of BD1 through her own pet Nyx, who can open doors that Kay can't reach, pickpocket NPCs, pick up ammo and money during combat without needing to leave cover, and more. He's a pretty useful little guy, so you'll want to get used to sending him out and giving him commands. Kay's combat is more range focused, with the character brandishing a VM-19 heavy blaster pistol, and while you can pick up trooper weapons temporarily to shoot different ways, the VM-19 is your primary weapon throughout the game. Though to freshen up the gameplay, there are different presets and upgrades you can apply to make it your own and make it stronger, making the little pistol pretty versatile. There are stun settings, which will quietly take out an enemy, but needs a lot of time to buffer, an electricity setting that can be used to solve some puzzles. This is also strong against droids, but against organic enemies is more or less useless. The grenade works like absolute shit in this game, though obviously they're cool when they do land. Some enemies have grenade launchers you can snatch up. These are really cool though, they will just absolutely wreck people. You have a single and rapid fire mode on your pistol, both with their own pros and cons, though I usually use the rapid fire build. I will say the combat in this game is very easy. NPCs are very dumb and you can run around them pretty easy, snap to cover and go back and forth with them, or even hold up in a room and easily outplay them as they come in. Like, they aren't cornering you. They aren't going to try to overwhelm you. You're not going to get caught up in something. They will pretty much just stand there and wait to die. It was sort of disappointing in a way, especially when the Star Wars Jedi series has more complex combat that is so satisfying to learn, and it's just hard enough that you have to gain some skills to be able to beat it adequately, but once you learn how to do it, it feels so rewarding and satisfying. It's also hard to not compare this game to that game, given the third-person perspective and similar layout. The game is semi-open world with a few playable planets. Cantonica from The Last Jedi, which is kind of a Las Vegas planet more or less with crowded casinos, though a rocky biome. Toshara, a desert canyon. Kimji, which I think is just Canada. Tatooine, which is, well, you know Tatooine. It's in all the movies. But it has Jabba's Palace, which is an absolutely amazing rendition and so fun to explore. I know there were other games you could explore it a bit, but this is the most fleshed out and detailed, and it's so cool here. And Akiva, a tropical rainforest planet. It's a bit bigger than the Jedi series, but I will say it's sort of quantity over quality, where sometimes you can just drive through empty fields and there just really isn't that much interesting going on. You might run into a side quest or a pirate or a bandit crew sometimes, which are kind of interesting, but sometimes it just feels too big for its own good. But it's also kind of fun to fly through these sceneries, so I think it's fine. I think by comparison, you have games like Jedi Survivor, which is just absolutely dense with content and things to see, puzzles. Even though the worlds are a tiny bit smaller, there's always something to do and something to explore or something to find. In this game, sometimes it felt like Kay would just hop on her speeder and zip from objective to objective with very little opposition and not much to see despite the admittedly pretty landscapes. Ship battles are open, slow, and occasionally disorienting, but realistically that's how a space battle as a freighter pilot would probably be. Also, the transitions to hyperspace and landing on planets are impressive and well done, kind of fun to watch. I think my problem with the environment is kind of my problem with most open worlds. It's a few really impressive environments packed in filler you have to drive through between environments. There is a gang reputation system. This comes through story and side missions, though you can also hurt your rep by getting caught stealing from or murdering gang members. It's cool and it's fun seeing saga characters like Jabba the Hutt or Kira from Solo. A character who frankly deserves more time to shine. I really like her for some reason. I love Solo, and I don't give a fuck what y'all say, since I know a lot of people just hate that movie for no reason, but it's good. I don't know what to tell you. Also, I love the Pikes. They're awesome too. These fish dudes are kind of cool looking. The enemies have their own quirks. Imperials have the best gear and the most people, but you can gun down stormtroopers with reckless abandon because they're terrible shots and they really do little to try to corner you. In terms of the gangs, it all feels kind of the same. I find them a bit less predictable, and I feel they actually try flanking you a bit more, but they also are in more disheveled environments than the wide open, clear Imperial bases, so that may be placebo more than anything for me in terms of them trying to actually get me. But these more dense environments allow for more cover, and I find them kind of fun. The speeder is simple and fun to fly despite the ships being pretty meh to me, but like the VM-19 pistol, where you can play with settings, it would be fun to have a bit more variety to your vehicle. The bases can often be fun when they show up. There's only a few in the game. Solve puzzles, kill a million guys, do a really hard rhythm game to slice safes and stuff. I got better at this, but for some reason I was just having a really hard time doing it. and also scale walls. I think the problem is you can beat most bases in probably 10 to 15 minutes. Then it's time to hop on that speeder and talk to random people till it lets you get back to the real bulk of the game. I will say some bases are bigger and a bit more interesting with more playtime, like the High Republic era capital ship. And I really like the High Republic era. I just read those novels and they're sweet. So it's kind of fun playing in those sandboxes. On top of that, the High Republic designs are kind of cool and unique and very classy, which I think is kind of fun. So I like that this game put just a taste of that into the main Saga era. Graphically, this game is a pretty mixed bag. I largely like the character models. Kay sometimes looks a bit weird, but honestly, it doesn't bother me too much. I grew up with the PS2 era, though, so I'm pretty easy to impress. I'm not a super huge graphics critic as long as the game's fun. The world often feels lived in and impressive. Walking around the casinos, cantinas, or Imperial bases honestly feels like you're wandering around the films and exploring real sets. It's pretty impressive. I will say sometimes the main open world, the shit you kind of drive through to go place to place, has nothing to do but the random little pirate fights and whatever. It eventually gets a little plain and boring, and I think it can almost wring some life out of the game a bit just because you get kind of used to these places, and then when you see something impressive, it just doesn't have as much punch. That could just be me, though. I do think it's nice getting a few varied planets and a lot of cool environments in each. Like I said, Jabba's Palace is probably my favorite location, especially because that's not something we got to see in like the Jedi Survivor games, and it's just one of the coolest locations from the original trilogy. Also, I found breaking into places like Jabba's Palace or the Imperial bases is always very satisfying. I just kind of love those little moments where you get to sneak around and solve little puzzles to try to infiltrate something, because once you get inside, it's very satisfying. I also think seeing something like Jabba's Palace in a 3D plane, exploring not just the iconic areas of the palace, but also things like servant quarters, offices, and other things Jabba would logistically need was super fun. This game has the tone you'd want. It's not serious, it's mostly just a fun adventure. Think like Indiana Jones. You just jump around, hip blasting bad guys, running through dangerous environments, stealing, robbing, quipping. It's good fun. There are minor sad or dark moments, like with Kay and her mother, but it's mostly just lighthearted fun end to end, and Kay is an engaging character who rounds it all together. Her sidecasts each have their quirks, and their relationships are fleshed out as they need to be in a game about running and gunning your way up the criminal underworld while running down any Imperials getting in your way. And also, it's just kind of cool that the cast has droids and different aliens, and I just think it's fun that this game has less of a human bias than I think Star Wars sometimes tends to have. It kind of reminds me of that movie, Solo: A Star Wars Story. The one that everyone hates because it has no lightsabers.
Kira, you and I will be working much more closely.
The music feels kind of like Mission Impossible meets Star Wars when it does show up. It feels very right for this story.
Okay, Denian, I'm in position.
Starting the fireworks. Get inside.
I'll get the alarm!
It is within the thesis of Star Wars while also doing its own thing with the material presented, and honestly I really enjoy it. You might hear me say that phrase in a lot of these videos. I think in general, Lucasfilm and the musicians working on Star Wars do such a good job of regulating music to kind of fit with John Williams' scores without actually just straight ripping those off, and while doing some unique stuff that fits the particular characters they're working on. If you like cosmetics, Kay has a variety of outfits, some of which reference characters directly, some that are more or less just based on this new character they created for the game. You can also use skins on your ship and guns that kind of flare up Kay and her equipment further as you go through the game. When you end up back on the Trailblazer, you'll occasionally get gifts from syndicates for doing stuff for them, and this is where you usually get new components and cosmetics, but there's places you can buy them and stuff with in-universe currency. This game ended up with 2 DLC packs, Wildcard and A Pirate's Fortune, featuring characters like Lando and Hondo. No Talon Card though. I hoped they were doing that when they announced a Wildcard DLC, but they didn't. I guess me as a extended universe fan kind of had too much hope Talon Card is such a cool character, and a character you could so easily bring into canon that I think it's kind of a bummer that he hasn't been used, but whatever, not a big deal. Star Wars Outlaws is a good game, not a great game. The open world looks good most of the time, but damn, it really could have used a bit more content for the space. I prefer the complex labyrinths from Jedi Survivor to what we have here. Hell, the third-person gameplay is decent, but it looks amateurish compared to the EA Jedi games by Respawn, and while the story is very unique for a Star Wars game, I can't help but compare it to the EA Jedi games, especially Jedi Survivor, and when you compare the gameplay and world, I think you'd be hard-pressed to prefer this over that game. I almost think this game suffers from being too close to another product that is just superior in virtually every way. It isn't bad, don't get me wrong, but that is kind of the hurdle with this one when they decided to make a third-person action game. The bases can be fun to break into, but they often feel a bit too quick and are far too easy with puzzles that take virtually no thought or skill and enemies that you can just walk around shooting without much regard. The game has really nice moments like landing on a planet from space. These moments I think look amazing, but the ships are a tiny bit jank when you fly them around. It does feel like Star Wars. I mean, you even get dressed as a stormtrooper in one scene. What's more Star Wars than that? But like, I think I said this before and I'll say it again. Imperials really should have solved the whole stolen armor problem. You can just mosey around doing whatever if you get your hands on some Imperial armor. The story is very predictable and the game is also very easy, but I don't know, I had fun. There are more fun games for sure, but I think this game was good, mostly at least. I just don't see it going to the Star Wars Game Hall of Fame anytime soon, especially with the contemporary Jedi games just so thoroughly overshadowing this one.